If you Google Grace Dieu Priory, you get ghost stories. And almost every one of them is the same. A woman in white moving through the ruins, watching from the trees. They call her the White Lady. But here's the problem. If this woman lived in the 13th century, why does her ghost look like it just got out of a Victorian novel? Why is it always a white lady? This contradiction is where our story begins. Grace Dieu Priory sits here in Leicestershire, England, quiet now, half swallowed by woodland. And for nearly a century, these ruins have been at the centre of one of the county's most persistent ghost stories. The sightings really started to gain attention in the early 20th century, around 1920, and what is striking is how consistent they are. People described the same thing again and again. A woman in white, floating rather than walking, no hands, no feet, sometimes no face at all. One of the most famous accounts comes from 1954. A bus driver passing the road by the priory late at night saw a woman in white waiting at the shelter. He pulled over, opened the doors, and no one got in. When he and the conductor stepped outside, she was gone. Almost 50 years later, another bus driver had a nearly similar experience on the same stretch of road. And there are other stories too. A council worker cutting grass among the ruins felt a sudden shove from behind, hard enough to knock him forward. When he turned, he saw a nun standing there, and then she vanished. Investigators talk about misty figures, disembodied whispers and sudden drops in temperature. Others don't see anything at all, just a feeling of not being alone, the feeling of being watched. Taken together, it's a lot. Too much to dismiss it as a campfire tale. Now, ghost stories have to start somewhere. And if we want to understand what it is that people think they're seeing here, we need to understand the woman that often gets blamed for it. Grace Dieu Priory was founded in the early 13th century, sometime between 1235 and 1241, by a woman named Roesia de Verdun. And her story is far more interesting than the ghosts. Roesia was a Norman heiress with estates across England and Ireland. In a period when most women were bound to male authority, she paid a very large sum of money to the king at the time, Henry III, and she became something rare, a femme sole, an independent woman with wealth, land and power. After the second husband died, she didn't fade into the background. She defended her property aggressively, managed her holdings, and even built the intimidating Castle Roche in Ireland. This wasn't a fragile or passive woman, but with her independence came pressure. She was deeply religious, and she was constantly pushed by the crown to remarry, to put her wealth into male hands, so to speak. Eventually, she made a different choice. She founded Grace Dieu Priory and later joined it. It was established for an unusual order of Augustinian canonesses, known as the White Nuns of St. Augustine. But Grace Dieu was not just a place of prayer. On the surface, Grace Dieu Priory was just a normal Augustinian community, but it was one of a kind. Life at Grace Dieu was strict. The nuns were forbidden from ever leaving the priory grounds, creating a completely self-contained world. But the priory wasn't just for prayer. It also ran a small hospital that cared for 12 of the local poor. For a while, it was a thriving community. Well, this is interesting. Got some graffiti there. Oh, it looks like a daisy wheel. Roesia lived out her final years here when she died around 1247. She was buried in the church right before the altar. Yeah, this is the church. In her will, she left money to ensure a light would burn on her tomb forever. That used to be, and still is, in some countries, quite a common practice. During the dissolution of the monasteries of Henry VIII, Grace Dieu was shut down. Its buildings were dismantled. The site was sold, and at some point during that upheaval, Roesia's tomb, the one where she ordered to have a lamp burning, was dug up from the now desecrated church and moved to the nearby parish church in Belton, where her stone effigy can still be seen today. The flame would foreshadow, in a way, the ghostly lights that people reported seeing centuries later. And this is where folklore steps in, because some say that disturbing her burial place tethered her to the land that she vowed never to leave. Over the next couple of centuries, the priory fell in disrepair, and by the 1730s, it was reduced to a ruin. But it found a new purpose. It became known as a romantic ruin, a picturesque spot for artists and poets like William Wordsworth to visit. Wordsworth visited here in 1833. He described Grace Dieu as a secluded ruin in a dell. But as the stones crumbled, local stories began to whisper that something of the priory's past had never really left. A woman in white, bound to the priory, still walking the ruins. It fits almost too neatly, but Roesia isn't the only figure tied to this place. There is another story attached to Grace Dieu, darker and more tragic. It tells of a 16th century prioress who broke her vows and bore a child. According to legend, and it is a legend, the baby was drowned in one of the fish ponds, and the woman herself was sealed alive within the convent walls. Actually, it just gives me the shivers a little bit. Her ghost is thought to wander the ruins, searching endlessly for her lost child. One name sometimes attached to this legend is Agnes Litherland. She does not appear on any historical lists, and she surfaces only in 20th century ghost lore, but it has become one of Grace Dieu's most enduring legends. It's very easy to see things around here, I gotta say. This version of the White Lady isn't powerful or respected. She is just a cautionary tale. And that leaves us with two competing stories for the same apparition. One, a healthy founder, disturbed after death, and two, a nameless woman, punished and erased. Different stories, same ghost, which bears the question, why is she always white? The White Lady isn't unique to Grace Dieu. She is everywhere, across Britain, across Europe, and across the world. Now, as you probably know, this isn't the first White Lady I've encountered. Well, actually, my first White Lady was when I was 13 years old, back in Hastings. It was this imposing Victorian building with a very small, very old cemetery attached to it. And the legend was very specific. We were afraid that she would come back and haunt us on the 15th of every month. It's nothing else than the story we have here in Grace Dieu Priory. Different name, different places, but it is the same image. And that tells us something important. Before ghosts were romantic, they were practical. In the medieval world, the dead were buried in simple winding sheets. If someone claimed to see a dead person, they described what they knew: a human shape wrapped in white cloth. Centuries later, in the Victorian rewrote that image. Writers turned burial shrouds into flowing dresses. The ghost stopped looking like death and started looking like sorrow. So when people are reporting seeing the white lady here, the question is not who they are seeing, but what they expect to see. We inherit our ghosts. And now, for the skeptics in the room, there have been attempts to explain the stories of Grace Dieu in a more practical term. The Thringstone fault runs through this part of Leicestershire, and there's a theory that energy from fault lines can affect the brain, causing hallucinations or the uncanny feeling of being watched. The Priory also gets sometimes tied to the stone tape theory, the idea that traumatic events can be recorded into the very fabric of the place, especially stone, and replayed like some kind of psychic echo. Now, the crumbling walls of Grace Dieu Priory, steeped in centuries of prayer, betrayal and ruin, would be a perfect candidate. If the White Lady is not a restless spirit, perhaps she's an imprint, a lingering memory of the Priory's past. And to add one more layer of mystery, there's also a possible ancient standing stone just west of the ruins. This hints that the area was considered spiritually important long before Roesia de Verdun ever laid her first brick of her priory. Whatever it is, we might never truly know. One thing is clear for me: how easy history gets rewritten. Well, I don't hear anything strange. I do not see anything strange. There's only one thing left to do, which is go around with a K2. I haven't felt anything in there, like zero. Now, I did put the spirit talker on, and it fired many words, one after the other, and there seemed to be like 3-4 spirits there. Ezekiel, Bernice is a very nunny name, isn't it? But now that I'm leaving and it's getting a little bit darker, it feels really strange. I don't feel like I'm being watched. And as we've seen before, when the environment is uncertain, this is where we scan for danger. Oh. I was talking, that thing, those plants moved, and it gave me a heart attack. I thought there was a dog there that was about to jump on me. This is how weird it is, the human mind. I wanted to put the K2 on, but there were far too many people. There would have been some interference, so I didn't. Well, you guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please give us a thumb up, and I shall see you in the next one. Thank you for watching. Bye!